Chairman of the Lee County Board of Commissioners calls the meeting to order on this, the 18th day of February 2008, to conduct all business which will be properly brought before the body. First order of business will be our invocation, and I ask you to remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. We all stand. Our Heavenly Father, I pray that you might invoke your blessings upon the proceedings of this hour. Father, I pray that you would give us the wisdom to handle the county business in a forthright and in the way that you would handle it if you were in our shoes. We thank you, Father, for past blessings. We thank you in advance for those blessings that you yet have in store for us, as individuals, as families, and as a county. Father, I pray that you might be with all of those today who are in harm's way. Pray that you might protect them. Father, not only would you be with the troops, but I pray that you might be with their families also, who are left behind in many cases. I pray, Father, for peace around the world. Pray for the soldiers of all nations who are fighting for freedom today. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be able to serve. And I pray, Father, that again, you would give us wisdom which can only come from you. For it's in Christ's name I pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any additional items concerning the agenda, both consent and the regular agenda?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I just have a couple of things here to mention. So far as the public comments in the past month and a half or so, I know I've received some letters of support that I want to have entered into the minutes of the meeting. Ms. Renette Seaman, 600 Valley Road, in support of the quarter-cent sales tax. Also, Mr. Jason Davenport, 721 Duke Drive. Also, at the last meeting, Mr. Hubert Garner came to the meeting. However, he was late getting here to sign up, but he did talk to commissioners when we took our break. And he is also in favor of the 1/4 cent sales tax. Also, I'd like to add into the minutes that the Economic Development Corporation in the package in the back of our agenda has a letter of support for the 1/4 cent sales tax.
All right, do I hear a motion that those items as stated be made part of today's minutes? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's so ordered.
Thank
Any
you,
other
Chairman.
questions or comments, or additions or deletions? If there are none, I will entertain a motion that we approve the agenda as printed.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. I now ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Chairman?
Yes.
Chairman, I just have one question. The budget amendment regarding item D regarding the health department, normally it states if there are any matching funds required, that specifically one did not. I just want to make sure that there are no matching funds for the health department item.
Ms. Manner,
matching funds required.
Okay.
Right, all those in favor of the approval of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Vote unanimous. Come now to the public comments section of our agenda, and I will remind you that you have 3 minutes, and Mr. Hall will be the timekeeper. Recognize Keith Clark.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to commend the Finance Committee for its detailed work and effort in researching the items that have come before it today. I would also like to commend the Finance Committee for its actions in attempting to consider this matter very carefully, including the impact of the potential debt on the county. I would like to say that I attended a meeting with the schools, which was a group of parents about the needs of the schools, and the needs there are certainly real. However, I want to raise a caution that in the discussion that followed about how things might proceed, the assumption was made that the money from the additional money from the 40% sales tax would be immediately available to be used to apply to financing. And this board has a policy, which I'm sure you are aware of, but many members of the public may not be, which requires future funding of all new buildings and renovations for the public school system to be approved by a public bond referendum. So I have some concerns that expectations are being raised in the community that the passage of this referendum will result in very immediate action being taken through the issuance of certificates of participation rather than a bond referendum. And I think that as was demonstrated in the report this just preceded this, it will be shown sooner. The county will have a dramatic increase in its ability to borrow money if it simply borrows money 1 year later than in borrowing it as soon as it can borrow it, which would provide the time for public, for bond referendums on the specific items, and be consistent with the board policy, and I think be consistent with what the voters in this county want, which is the opportunity to participate in the decisions to borrow major amounts of money. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. Recognize Mr. Chet Mann.
Thank you, sir. I represent the Chamber of Commerce and myself personally, and we are delivering to you today the results of the Chamber's survey of its members on the question of a 4% sales tax. By a wide majority, over 75% of our members fully support the sales tax referendum. 77% support placing the measure on the May ballot. Our job as a chamber is to support and stimulate our business members and our business community. We're not always in favor of a tax increase of any kind, but on this one we are. And we think this is the most fairly portioned option that you can provide to the citizens of Lee County. And we also believe that it tells our citizens that, and our prospective neighbors and our prospective businesses that are looking to relocate, that we have our priorities in order. We know that a quality education system, especially on a high school level, equates to a good business environment. So we feel it's very important to do so. We will place before you today a resolution by our board in support of this way forward for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Recognize Mr. Jerry Pettily.
Mr. Chairman, I'm this year chairman of the Education Committee for the Chamber of Commerce here in Sanford. As part of that committee, we developed a letter, and hopefully y'all have it in front of you there, of our position on education. And I'm not a big public speaker, so please read the letter, and I'll just try to hit some highlights. Presently, I'm the plant manager at Meikle Automation here in Sanford. We do manufacturing. I've been in almost every facility here in the community. My company does very well because of education here in this community. We have a college, high school, a lot of good things happening with education in this county. It is very, very important to manufacturing that we keep this education momentum going in this county. Not just for the businesses here, but also to get new business in. It's an important thing. You talked to Bob Hughes. He lets you know how important it is that people have educations in this community, not just K through 12, but also K through 14 now, in order to attract business. So we want you to do whatever you can for us to keep this momentum in education moving forward. And it seems to our committee that quarter cent sales tax is a very small price to pay to keep it going. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Pedley. Dan Perry? Perry? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the commission here. I might do something probably very rarely is done for each and every one of y'all. As a citizen, as a taxpayer of Lee County, I'd personally like to thank you for the efforts that y'all do for the citizens of Lee County. I know you don't ever hear that, but I would like to tell you the bottom line. I always agree.
Let's give you a round of
Thank you, appreciate it.
You know, I was asked to say something on behalf of the referendum that you have before you about trying to improve the quality of the education and the quality of the buildings at both Lee Senior High School and also at the college. I'm not here to represent anyone like the chamber, although I've been on the chamber. All I can say is that the Perry family has been in Lee County for it seems like 100 years, and we've had children in every school system, every school in the system. And it's not only for that benefit, but all of us realize that the future of Lee County and the city of Sanford lies with our children. And our children are our future. They're our future doctors, our future commissioners, our future mayors, and everything. And having 3 children that have graduated from Lee Senior and graduating myself from Lee Senior High School, let me tell you, we can't ask for a better group of administrators, teachers, the quality education is there. But I just feel we owe it to every employee at Lee Senior High School to improve the conditions of half of that facility. You know, it is pretty rough. You've all seen it. We've all, and everyone hates to hear the word tax. And it seems, you know, I put some math to it. On $100, we're only talking 25 cents. If we really had a my way, it'd be a penny. Because I read an article, and I'm gonna close with this, to what the impact of 1 penny can be. We're asking for 1/4 of 1 cent to help improve the grounds of Lee Senior and at CCCC. And some taxpayers are gonna be mad. I mean, that's natural. But when you look at it and you look at the impact and how it can affect everyone, I guess what I could say is that 1/4 of 1%, we can all give that up to improve the quality of our school system. And I just hope y'all will consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. That concludes the public comment section. Moving out now on to new business. Manager.
Yes, sir.
A couple of resolutions that were on the consent agenda. Do we need to read each one of those?
I don't believe so. No, sir. Not unless you want to.
First item of new business, we do not have any old. But it will be the presentation by Davenport and Company, and introduce to you Ted Cole.
I think Ms. Mentor's going to introduce Mr.
Okay,
Cole.
well, I'm
Sorry.
need us overstep.
That's okay. Today, Ted Cole from Davenport and Company, which is our financial advisor, along with Bob Hire, here to present to you a financial plan that we have asked them to do. You're used to them coming to the board retreat and trying to tie the financial plan to our capital improvements program. We asked them to do things a little differently this year and to take, instead of looking at specific projects, look at our debt capacity. Just like today, for the last couple of meetings, you've heard a lot about the 0.25% sales tax referendum. So we wanted to look at what our debt capacity is with no tax increase at all, with the capacity of the 4% sales tax referendum passing, and that combination or without your property tax increase. So that is what they are here to do today, and I think you'll see some interesting information and see then what we may be trying to look ahead for in our capital improvements program. So I will turn it over to Cole. It's time.
Thank you. Good to see everybody again and some new faces. As Lisa said, we've sort of on an annual basis at least come and updated the board for.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Those, you dim the lights, please.
Okay. Yeah, it might be a little easier. Give you all an update on where you stand as it relates to your capital position, your debt position, and it always, we try to tie it in timing-wise as it relates to your CIP process. So you've all got a book in front of you. It goes page for page with the presentation. I realize with the lights down it might be difficult to see the book, but at any point please stop me for any further explanation or clarification. With that, we'll get right into it. Just generally, some very basic goals and objectives. As Lisa said, in this scenario, unlike years past, at this point we have just looked at some very generic borrowing capacities for the county, not tying it to your CIP specifically, not tying it to specific projects or dollar amounts, but rather just trying to give an initial perspective on how much money you all might be able to borrow on a going forward basis, given some parameters on what money you have available to pay for the debt service, and also taking a look that we're in compliance with any existing debt policies that are in place. And ultimately, as we say here in the goals and objectives, we're trying to work towards helping establish an overall multi-year plan of finance that takes into consideration specific projects as you all move your CIP process forward. The first thing we want to do over the next several pages is just quickly reorient everybody to the amount of debt that you have in place today. Everything that we're going to show you here over the next few slides is tied into what is the roughly the $69 million worth of general fund or tax-supported debt that you have in place. There's a combination of GOs and COPs, installment purchases. It's lots of different types of debt, but it's about $69 million of debt that's generally tax-supported, general fund supported. And you can see the blue portion of the graph represents the principal payment on a fiscal year basis. The gold represents the interest component on a fiscal year basis, and you can see how over time the debt declines, which is one of the means by which you'll be able to afford some new debt going forward is that decline in your existing debt. You'll see that in a little more detail here in a moment. We wanted to give you a good perspective again on where you are today as it relates to some specific ratios and policies. And the first one we wanted to look at on page 4 is called the payout ratio. It's a ratio that looks at how much of your debt, again, roughly that $69 million of debt, how much of that is being paid off in the next 10-year period. It's a rolling ratio that looks at a 10-year period every year, and in this case, we're focused on the fiscal year 2018, and what you see is that roughly 60% of that debt is paid off in the next 10 years, 60% of that $69 million of debt. That's a number that's nicely above your current policy of 50%, and as it relates to just general peer groups, as the rating agencies who rate your bonds would look at it, how the LGC, the Local Government Commission, or investors would look at it, you're in very good stead in this regard in terms of of retiring your debt in a moderately rapid pace, not extending it, not backloading your debt. So you're in a pretty good position as it relates to your payout ratio. Page 5 looks at debt per capita. It's another measurement that's looked at by various entities. Again, the rating agencies, investors, bond insurers, the local government commission. And in this case, again, just your existing debt on your population base of roughly 56,000 people. We have made an assumption that your population or your base population is going to grow by a 1.68% per year growth rate. That's the lesser of the 5 and 10-year average. So what you see is over time this ratio declines. It's a function of your debt being paid off, and it's a function of your population base growing at roughly 1.7% per year. You can see that for other North Carolina counties, 50 to 100,000 in population, where the high, the average, and the low is under this measurement of debt per capita. Keep in mind that as every year passes, these ratios get updated, and if some county had a particular active year in issuing debt, their ratio may change significantly. So that high, that average, and the low have a tendency year over year to move around a bit. Page 6 is debt to assessed value. In this case, we're measuring that $69 million worth of debt that you have in place today as a percentage of your tax base. The county has a policy in place that under a going forward basis should be capped at a 2% level. You can see that you're just a hair under 1.5% currently. We're making an assumption that the tax base in the county is growing by 2% per year, really just tied to what we're trying to capture there as natural growth, new construction type activity. And again, as it relates to the North Carolina benchmarks on the right, you can see where the high, the average, and the low is for the counties across the state, 50 to 100,000 in population. So as it relates to this ratio, you've got ample capacity within your current policies. And when we get to this part of the presentation that looks at new debt, we go back and revisit each of these to see how the new debt impacts the policy. Lastly on the ratio is debt service as a percent of expenditures, or how much of your annual payout or your annual budget is dedicated toward debt service. You've got a policy that caps that at 15%. You're at about 12% in the 08 fiscal year, the current fiscal year. It's declining over time as that annual debt service tails off. And we've made an assumption there that expenditure growth, or budget growth in this case, is at a 3% per year assumption. Beginning on page 8, we're going to transition out of the existing debt, and now we're going to start building a case or building some assumptions about new debt. And the first thing we needed to do was sort of revisit what sort of resources do we have in place, or might we have in place moving forward, to help pay for debt. And we've broken it down into 2 major categories. The first is one-time revenues at the top of the page. That's a single pot of money, if you will, that once you spend it, it's gone for the purposes of this analysis. And it's a capital reserve fund that's currently funded at about $2 million total. And as a starting point for the analysis, we've said we're going to maintain a minimum fund balance in that capital reserve of $1 million. We're not going to spend it below $1 million. We want to provide some monies there for other opportunities or requirements. And the other $1 million that we have agreed to put in play, we're going to show how that's used over a multi-year period of time to help buy down the debt service on the new proposed or potential new debt. As it relates to ongoing revenues, regularly available year after year, we've identified 4 or 5 different. Some of these have been in this capital plan for many years, and some of them are new. The first one is restricted sales tax monies. That is a source of debt service repayment that the county has had in their capital plan for a number of years. So that's a consistent assumption from last year and years prior. Bullet point number 2, which we've heard some discussion on already at the meeting, is a potential new source of revenue for a capital plan, and that is the potential quarter-cent sales tax. We've made some assumptions about what sorts of revenue are going to be available from that if that were to pass and you were to enact it. That would be a source of revenue that would begin in the '09 fiscal year, the year we're about to go into. So you're going to see how that source of debt service repayment, how that impacts your ability to borrow. Thirdly is public school building capital fund monies. That's a schedule of revenues that is provided by the state. That is another source of debt repayment that's been in the plan for a number of years. We've just updated those numbers based upon the most current state schedule. Fourth bullet point there is yet again another pot of money or a stream of funds that has been in the capital plan for a number of years. It's tied to a current county policy, and that is that on an annual basis you all will contribute to that capital reserve fund that I mentioned earlier. You're going to contribute to it at a rate of 1% of your budget or 1% of your expenditures, and you'll see how that gets laid in on an annual basis. And then lastly, you are currently, as a county, as a budget, allocating the equivalent of about 9.5 cents on the tax rate. So wherever the tax rate is today, roughly 9.5 cents of that levy is going towards debt service, again, for governmental projects, school projects, that roughly that $69 million worth of debt that's out there. That's a budget item, if you will, or an approach to the budget that's been utilized for a number of years, and we've continued that. And then lastly, just as a little bit of perspective, every penny on your tax rate is generating roughly $436,000 in revenue. This is the summary of the cases, and we've got some backup for every case, which I'm going to kind of flip back and forth, so just bear with me on the remote control here. But let me try to walk through big picture what we've done. We've basically run 4 cases, and I'm going to look at the top yellow box. It's case 1. There's a case 1A and a case 1B. I'm going to start with case 1A, and what that's saying is, with no lottery monies, the county does receive lottery monies from the state. For the purposes of this overall capital plan, we have not assumed that any of those revenues are available for debt service. Instead, those revenues are outside of the scope of this, and they're being used for non-debt capital items, pay-as-you-go capital. So you'll notice in every case that lottery monies are not a part of the analysis. The next column, working from left to right, is whether we assume there's a quarter-cent sales tax revenue or not, and you can see that for every case we assume that there is, and we also assume that there isn't, so we can begin to get an assessment of what that means to us in terms of our ability to issue debt. We've then solved for the borrowing amount column, and again, that's a generic borrowing amount, not specific to any project or any sort of department. It's just generically how much money can you borrow within the confines of the capital plan that you have, all of those different revenue sources that we talked about as being available for debt service, and then potentially with and without that quarter-cent sales tax. So when you look at case 1, what we've solved for there is that you have about $7.9 million of debt capacity beginning in FY09, so that's the next fiscal year, the year we're about to go into, and that assumes no lottery, no quarter-cent sales tax, and no further dedication of any tax revenue whatsoever. So you've got roughly $8 million that you can borrow within the scope of that assumption. We then said, well, what if you went and borrowed about 3 years later in 2012, and under the same set of assumptions you could leverage about another $22.5 million worth of debt. That passage of time allows a couple of things to happen. It allows some of those revenues that have been generated on an annual basis to accumulate themselves in the capital reserve fund. And it also allows your existing debt, if you recall, that $69 million worth of debt steps down every year, and that provides a little more capacity. So all told, between an 09 and a 2012 borrowing, you're talking about just at about $30 million worth of debt capacity. Case 1B, take it a step further, and we lay in the assumption for the revenues tied to the quarter-cent sales tax. And what you see is a pretty stark comparison between case 1A and 1B, and that is with the quarter-cent sales tax and an 09 borrowing. If you were to borrow everything you could in 09, you would have capacity for about $36 million worth of debt. That includes the quarter-cent sales tax, but it does not require any additional source of funding beyond what you've already got in your capital plan or your capital budget. And it should be noted, it's important, everybody, to be clear that the assumptions that we've made here in terms of measuring your debt capacity is really just tied to capital. It's how much debt can you bring on. It does not address any potential operating cost impacts that might result from a project, whether it's an operating cost increase or maybe there's some efficiencies that could be gained through other projects. So this is capital oriented. It has not incorporated operating impacts. And then let me flip through. I want to take you to something here quickly on case 1A. We've done this for every case, and it's in the appendix, but we've basically gone back to your ratios. And in this case, for case 1A, we have laid in the dark blue is that existing debt that you already have in place. The gold represents that new debt that comes online, roughly that 7 or 8 million, followed by another 22 million in 2012. That's what's represented there. You can see that you're still within tolerance of your two policies there, debt to assessed value and debt service to expenditures. Case 1B, you can see that was a significantly higher amount of debt capacity in case 1B, almost 36 million, I believe. And what you see is that you get pretty close to your policy of 2% debt to assessed value and debt service to expenditures. I would say, looking at this, that's a doable amount of debt for you all from an affordability standpoint, assuming that the quarter-cent sales tax were to move forward, and it's doable within the confines of your policies, but it's getting close to the upper limits of those two policies. Go back to the summary. Okay, case 2. The only thing we've changed here in case 2 is under the column called tax impact, and we've made an assumption here, again, just a generic global assumption, that in addition to the funding that you already have dedicated to debt service, that you might be willing to consider, or what would it do to your debt capacity if you were to dedicate an additional 1 penny's worth of revenue, 1 penny from your tax levy, towards the capital plan, and that would be an ongoing dedication of that penny, roughly $460,000 a year on top of what you're already doing. And what you see is your capacity without the quarter-cent sales tax is just under 18 million in 09. Compare that to case 1A, where your capacity was about 8 million in 09. Basically, what that tells you is 1 penny on your tax rate, or 1 additional penny on your tax rate, will bring you about another $10 million worth of debt capacity in that first year. When you look at the 1 penny increase with the quarter-cent sales tax, case 2B, you can see that your capacity takes a step up to about 41.5 million. Again, significantly more dollars available for debt repayment between the quarter-cent sales tax and an additional penny. Case 3 builds on that by adding yet another equivalent penny towards the program. Again, that is just to try to give some perspective, given the CIP, the process that you all are about to embark on, what sort of resources would be required for certain levels of project funding, and what you see is without the quarter-cent sales tax, you're at about $27 million in '09, followed by about $49 million if you were to institute and dedicate the full quarter-cent sales tax towards the overall capital plan with the 2 pennies. And then lastly, on case 4, we did a couple of different things. Case 4A makes an assumption that the quarter-cent sales tax is not in play, it's not available. And what you see is we did change the assumption that instead of borrowing in fiscal year 2009, we do no borrowing in '09 and we wait to fiscal year 10. And what you see is your debt capacity takes a step up of about $15.5 million. You can compare that to case 1A, where you had borrowing capacity in '09 of about $8 million without the quarter-cent. But if you do nothing and you wait a year, your capacity goes up to about 15 to 16 million. It almost doubles if you wait a year. And again, that's a function of having some of your currently dedicated revenues that are going towards your debt program able to be set aside and used a year later, as well as allowing 1 more year's worth of debt to take a step down. So we thought that was perhaps of interest to you as it relates to the timing of debt, '09 versus 10. And then lastly, case 4B, where we have laid in the quarter-cent sales tax revenue on an '09 basis, 10, 11, 12 on. And as a sort of an offset to that quarter-cent sales tax, we wanted to see how the debt capacity would change if we actually took the equivalent of 1 of your pennies on the tax rate out of the plan. So instead of maybe 9.5 pennies that you're dedicating to the tax to the debt plan now, in this case there would be an assumption that the quarter-cent sales tax comes in and you reduce that to 8.5 pennies on your tax rate. And what you see is you've got an '09 debt capacity of about $27 million. What I can tell you is anytime you delay the debt by a year or 2, or you issue less than what's shown here, you're just creating a little more capacity in subsequent years. Again, to allow current debt to step down or to allow current revenues or reserves to be held for another day. So hopefully that gives you some general parameters as to what you're really looking at in terms of debt affordability within the confines of the quarter-cent sales tax and different rates of tax rate contribution to debt. I know as your CIP plan unfolds, there may be a desire to look at specific cases in terms of specific projects and dollar amounts and timing, and we're certainly well positioned to look at that at the right time. I believe is there anything else we needed to cover? As I said, the back of the book has has actually the supporting information for every one of the cases we looked at. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions or address any concerns.
Any board member have a question? It's a good presentation.
Thank you. I'm still awake.
We were talking about that amount of money, we were awake. Moving now to the next item on our business, item B, resolution asking the Board of Elections to hold a special election on the quarter-cent sales tax restitution. Recognize the county manager or Mr. Reeves who's going to do this.
You can do the reading, I'll do the talking.
Okay.
All right. Resolution by the Lee County Board of Commissioners requesting the Lee County Board of Elections hold a special election advisory referendum for the levy of a local sales tax. Whereas the 2007 State Appropriations Act, House Bill 1473, amended Chapter 105 of the North Carolina General Statutes, Statutes 105 to 601 through 604 and 105-535 through 538, which provides counties with the authority to levy a local sales and use tax at a rate of 1/4%, and whereas the above referenced statute amendments further provide that prior to the adoption of the county commissioners of a resolution that would levy a local sales tax, there must be conducted a special election advisory referendum whereby the county voters would have the opportunity to vote for or against the levy of the above referenced local tax by the county commissioners. Furthermore, the county commissioners could not levy a local sales tax unless a majority of those citizens voting in the special election vote for the levy of either of said tax. And whereas the Lee County Board of Commissioners have taken public comments on the proposed tax at their January 21st, 2008 and February 4th, 2008 regular meetings, at which times the Board of Commissioners considered the issue of whether the board should direct the Lee County Board of Elections to conduct a special election advisory referendum on the question of whether to levy a local sales tax as provided in the above referenced statutes, that after deliberations and at their February 18th, 2008 regular meeting, a motion was fully made and seconded and passed by a blank to blank vote by the Board of Members to request the Lee County Board of Elections to conduct a special election advisory referendum in Lee County on Tuesday, May 6, 2008, on the question of whether to levy a local sales tax in Lee County. Now therefore be it resolved by the Lee County Board of Commissioners that the Lee County Board of Elections is hereby requested to conduct a special election advisory referendum on Tuesday, May 6, 2008 for all of Lee County on the following ballot question: either for or against local sales and use tax at the rate of 1/4% in addition to all other state and local sales and use taxes. Further be it resolved that the Lee County Board of Commissioners request at such time the special election voting data is tabulated and certified, that the Board of Elections forward said advisory referendum results to the Board of Commissioners in order that the Commissioners can further deliberate and proceed as allowed in the above referenced amendments to Chapter 105 of the North Carolina General Statutes, adopted this 18th day of February 2008, Lee County Board of Commissioners.
All right, Mr. Reeves, do we have a recommendation from the Finance Committee?
I do. We have a unanimous vote of support for the resolution. For the benefit of those who aren't able to attend the meeting, I'll withhold the motion until you had time to discuss it, if there's need for discussion.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to this resolution, the work the Finance Committee has done, the public comments of the last two meetings, and the information that I wrote down, there was overwhelming support of 63% of the 38 persons speaking in favor of the 1/4 cent sales tax. I move that we put this on the May 6th primary for vote by the people.
All right, any further discussion?
Yes, I have a comment. Last fall, when we had started to take up this discussion, I said that I would support a sales tax increase if we could see a reduction in our property tax rate. In fact, one of the scenarios we saw here was, I strongly believe that our property tax rate in Lee County is too high. It's tough on our retirees living on fixed incomes, but I'm of the belief that it also affects our economic development, because it affects also business owners who are paying that high rate on their businesses. I'm going to vote for this resolution, but I am not necessarily saying that I think we need that tax increase on top of our current taxes. So I'm hoping that as we get into this, we'll be able to see that we can grant property tax relief as part of this?
Well, our budget process has already begun, so we can address those issues at the appropriate time. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the resolution as read by the county manager. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. It is adopted unanimously.
Now that it's adopted, Mr. Chair, I have a couple of comments I want to make to you. I want to make sure that we fully understand that this is only the first step in the process. It will now be up to the general public to decide whether this is going to be the right thing for this county or not. I'm hoping that it will be. It seems to be the most fair and equitable way to offer up a resolution for the need for additional resources. However, I do want to point out that while we have indicated in this resolution that the debt service on financing capital projects such as the schools, public schools and community college, those are not necessarily things that we're going to do right away. I want to remind this board that has been and continues to be some discussion about additional elementary schools. I think the county manager has been advised of what we may be facing in another, couple of years? Possibility of 2 more elementary schools. So this, in regards to your comment about lowering the tax rate, has a lot to do with what the demands are from the public and what they're willing to support. While I regret our tax rate being as high as it is, I can honestly tell you that I'm one of the members of this board who would like to see it reduced. But the demand and the growth in this county is such that you may wind up having to do what you have to do. And if you can't vote to support it, certainly that's your right. People have elected you. This seat doesn't belong to me, it belongs to the people. But I'll have to do what I think is best for the county as a whole when that time's come.
Well, a point of clarification also, it's been mentioned about referendum and the issuance of COPS. Our policy as it now stands, and this policy was adopted December the 4th of 2006. The requirement is that any new construction or renovations be approved by the general public, and of course that would be by the means of referendum. We do not have the authority right now unless the policy would be changed to go the COPS route.
Correct.
So we need to understand that also.
And the next opportunity for that would be possibly November, if this board so chooses.
Any further discussion? Okay. Move now to the manager's report.
Mr. Chairman, are we gonna act on the referendum of 10? Because we've only,
We have a second part.
Yeah, we have a second.
second part of that.
Second
Each
resolution.
35.
Go ahead.
The Finance Committee voted on a revised resolution for the intent, which was approved by them unanimously, and I think has been handed out to the board members. And before I read that, I need to tell you also that we've received 2 additional resolutions, one from the PTO organization for Lee County High School in support of the 1/4% sales tax, and also from the Friends of Lee County High School in support of the 1/4% sales tax, and obviously in support, both resolutions were in support of the high school.
Read on.
You ready for me to go again?
Yes, sir.
It's redundant. The first part is basically the same as what I just read, so.
Short version.
All right. Well, I'll try to be quick. Resolution by the Lee County Board of Commissioners stating the intended uses of the 2007 quarter-cent sales tax revenue in the advisory referendum for the levy of a local sales tax if it passes by a majority vote. Whereas the 2007 State Appropriations Act amended Chapter 105 of the North Carolina General Statutes, which provides counties with the authority to levy a local sales tax and use tax at a rate of 1/4%, and whereas the above referenced statute amendments further provide that prior to the adoption of the county commissioners of a resolution that would levy a local sales tax, there must be first conducted a special election advisory referendum whereby the county voters would have the authority to vote for or against the levy of the above referenced local tax by the county commissioners. Furthermore, the county commissioners could not levy a local sales tax unless a majority of those citizens voting in the special election vote for the levy of said tax. And whereas the Lee County Board of Commissioners have taken public comment on the proposed tax at their January 21st, 2008 and February 4th, 2008 regular meetings, at which times the Board of Commissioners heard overwhelming support for the quarter-cent sales tax and support for educational capital projects. And whereas the Lee County Finance Committee and Board of Commissioners have reviewed the issue in public comments and determined that the levy of such a sales tax is in the best interest of the Lee County government and its citizens. And whereas that after careful deliberations, the commissioners at their February 18, 2008 regular meeting, a motion was duly made and seconded by a 7-0 vote by the board members to request that the Lee County Board of Elections conduct a special election advisory referendum in Lee County on Tuesday, May 6, 2008, on the question of whether to levy a local sales tax in Lee County. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Lee County Board of Commissioners that it is the intent of the commissioners to use the revenue from the 2007 quarter-cent sales tax, if successful, for the following. Point A, debt service on the financing of capital projects for the Lee County Board of Education and Central Carolina Community College. And point B, debt service on other capital projects listed in the county's 2009-2013 capital improvement plan. Be it resolved that the Lee County Board of Commissioners further states that these funds are needed to reduce the increasing property tax burden on the citizens of Lee County. The Commissioners hereby instruct the county staff to prepare materials to educate the citizens of Lee County on the need and purpose of the new quarter-cent sales tax in the upcoming referendum and make said materials available to the public. Adopted this the 18th day of February 2008, Lee County Board of Commissioners.
Right, and this was adopted unanimously by the Finance Committee.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
I make a motion that this resolution be approved. I have a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Why the rewording? Can you explain?
Well, the specific projects have not been approved by the board as of yet, so it was determined that they needed to be more generic and broader, so that they would encompass those areas. But we still have to go through the CIP and adopt the CIP, so specific projects were removed.
And quite frankly, to do anything before we determine whether this is going to be, whether it passes or not, is premature. Some of the CIP won't even make it to first base if this doesn't pass. And other than that, I don't want it to be misleading. It's not for any one group or one project.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of the resolution, and that is a resolution from this board on the use of the funds that would be coming in as a result of the quarter-cent sales tax if it is approved by the
Public.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The vote is unanimous. Now, Mr. Crumpler.
Ms. Minter has the financial report.
Before I
I get into the financial update, I would like to give you an update on our time and attendance project. As of yesterday morning, or 12 o'clock yesterday, we did start live testing of our time and attendance system. This is the beginning of a 10-week test period that we've built in. It has not been without bugs today and yesterday, and we'll continue to do some this next couple of weeks. But that was the intention of giving ourselves such a long time to test and be able to debug the system before we go live with payroll. I want to say a very gracious thank you to the implementation team, which was made up of Kelly Alford, finance staff, Debbie Coggins from finance, Ryan Joan and Edra Norton from IT, Joyce McGee from HR, and John Crumpton along with myself. This team has worked very, very hard to bring this to fruition, and I'm personally very proud to say that we are almost there and stuff. So if you see me, then give them a big kudos if you don't mind. As far as the financial update, you have the numbers through January 31st in front of you. You can see that our property tax revenues continue to come in well in the month of January. You will see those start dropping off now through the rest of the fiscal year. What we'll be collecting now will be past due taxes and motor vehicle taxes in most months. Most departments are under the threshold for the time frame we're at, which would be 67.8%. The few that are above that still relate to major expenditures early in the year, along with economic development. There is one I do want to reference you to about 3/4 of the way down the page. Juvenile detention shows being at 109.91%. We need to make a journal entry correction there. You'll see juvenile probation rent is still showing 0. We had an error in our system and the account number got changed on an invoice, so we will make that correction in the next month so that money is properly allocated, and that will bring that back into line. The few that are at 75% are quarterly appropriations. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. Sales tax numbers were not in time to get those into your agenda package, so we'll report those to you at the next meeting.
Any question on that minute? If there are none, then your motion that this report be approved.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. So ordered. Thank you very much. Anything else, Mr. Crump?
Yes, sir. My report, I was just looking at it, and I don't see who I'm looking for, so I'm going to just move on. Mr. Haynes has sent us a, there he is, has sent us a email requesting our interest in a pan flu tabletop exercise in late spring with the Board of Health. I need to ask if there's any interested parties. I'm sure Mr. Quibble, as the representative of the Health Board, would love to participate. And I'm sure they'll want me to participate, so.
Appreciate you serving me.
Any other,
Tabletop demonstration.
They're gonna lay it on the table.
yeah, they basically go through the procedures if we have the epidemic, and we discuss each department's roles and how we respond and so on and so forth to it. So if there's any interest, just let me know. I invited Mr. Haynes here. We had a question this past week about animal control and how we respond on weekends and what the public needs to do. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to let the public know what they need to do if they have an animal control issue on the weekends. And I'll let Mr. Haynes take the mic here and explain our procedures.
This actually came about as a result of an incident out in the Comnock area. So the weekend, a young lady was walking her pet. Another dog comes out of nowhere and attacks it. Does about, the initial estimate was around $1,200 for damage and surgeries and emergency room care. But it was all done up in Cary because we didn't quite know what the process was here in the county. That's why I've asked them to come before this board today.
As y'all know, we have someone on call 24/7, and I think you all know Carl Weissman, who's our supervisor down in control.
Let me stop you there. this is not to accuse him of not doing anything. We're just simply saying the process is not known to the public, and we want to get it out
I
there.
understand, yes,
All right.
I'm just kind of explaining
All
our
right.
situation. Of course, folks can call, if it's in the county, if they call the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department is notified of our folks who are on call with their contact information. And if it's in the city police are notified of our roster and who is on call with their contact information. So, we should be able to be reached. Now, the Board of Health did, I didn't bring the policy down, but did pass a policy. We do not come out in all situations on 24/7. We do have to be somewhat discretionary because the small incidences can build up a lot of comp time. We generally come out in all cases if there is a human who has been bitten, or if there is, that is being threatened, or if there's a rabies exposure. In any situation like that, or a child obviously a child threatened, we would come out. In a case like this, where the damage was already done, we do not have, we do not offer veterinary care there. We could provide, names of resources of folks where someone could take an animal. But, so does that answer the question?
Yeah, but in that particular case where the other dog attacked her dog, I mean, would you not go out and investigate the other dog?
Well, when we're did any of the parties contact us in reference to it?
No, but she didn't know what to do. But I mean, in the future,
we would go out and investigate, but that is a civil matter. They would have to get attorneys themselves. Our authority doesn't allow us to go in and make decisions like that. If one of the dogs is aggressive, we can deem the dog that started it dangerous and require them to keep the dog up to the state code. But as far as us being able to help her get her $1,200 back, that would be a civil matter. But if they call the police,
I don't think that's what we're after.
Okay.
What we were after, she was just after if she needed assistance.
Call the police and the sheriff's department, and they call us.
Okay.
They have the numbers 24/7. We carry a pager, a beeper, and our house phone.
Here's what's important. It's an emotional time for a lot of people when it happens. So we're not always thinking, and we want to call someone who can help guide us through the process. They don't always know who to contact. I would have never known. I talked to the manager, and he said in one county he served, then they called 911 like it was a human situation. So I didn't know what our policy was, and I'm hoping that you'll understand that they just need to know what to do on weekends when they can't get to you.
Call us. We are in the phone book. We are on the web page. We are in advertisements. We try to put our, all of our contact number in advertisements. The police, 911 would work too. In a situation, they would get up with us.
So you learned something yourself.
I always do.
Go ahead, John.
Well, any more questions for Mr. Haynes?
I was just gonna say, last Sunday, of course, this happened several months ago. Basically, the same type situation, not knowing what to do. But pit bulls got loose, killed a lady's cats. I'll get into it more with you, but it's basically the same situation, not knowing who to call. When finally somebody comes out, they wind up setting, traps and stuff like this to try to catch the animals or whatever that actually kill the cats. And, it's just something that needs to be worked close together with the residents, whether they live right here in town or whether they live out in the county. But I think, in this situation, it was apparently just overlooked or what have you. But to sit there and go out and capture cats and saying that they needed to be vaccinated, the lady didn't call about that. It was the killing of 2 cats by 2 pit bulls. But I think we need to really get a handle on this situation, just like Mr. Reeves and Mr. Crumpton was talking about.
Well, the hours of operation of the animal control are the same as regular county employees, 8 to 5, 5 days a week. So not only on weekends, but also any off hours at night when it would occur. So,
Well, we've covered two very important points, and that is, you can call 911, you can call the sheriff, you can call the police department. I just think a public service announcement to remind folks when they do have these situations occur after hours or on weekends, that they know what to do now, those that would hear this program. But the other side of that coin is, do you know if there are veterinarians who notify the sheriff or police department about their on-call folks over the weekend?
If the veterinarians notify,
If you know if they have that program in place, any of the veterinarians?
I think it was Carl, do you guys?
South Animal
Yeah.
Hospital is the only one, they're open 4 hours on Saturday, other than that, they send you to Cumberland County, so they're not open on weekends. But if they call the animal shelter, the recording does tell them if it's an emergency after hours, to contact the police department or the sheriff's department.
All right. And we ought to do a public service announcement.
We can do that, and we're putting our phone number on our sign out there on 421, and we've also approached General Services. We're gonna try to get a similar sign, or exact same sign, on the other side of the road, so if you're coming in on 421, you see that also. And we're gonna add, we've added the adoptions, and we're gonna add a spay and neuter recommendation to it too, so we get people coming and going on that.
Good. Thank you.
all right, thank you, Mr. Haynes. Thank you, Mr. Eisman.
Mr. Chairman, item 2 on my report is to set the meeting schedule for March. As you know, and probably some of the other members know, that Commissioner Lamont will be in Washington, D.C. representing the board at the NACO Legislative Goals Conference. So we won't be meeting that first Monday in March. And we asked the board's pleasure on whether we want to do 2 meetings in March or do the 1 meeting on the 17th, I believe is the date.
I'm over the 17th.
Fine.
One meeting on the 17th,
Yes.
and if anything should come up that we needed to handle, then we can always call. Correct?
We thank you for that.
All in favor of having 1 meeting in March on the 17th, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The motion is unanimous, carried unanimously.
Item 3 is the CDBG project update, and before I actually get into that, I was notified today by Mrs. Kennedy that the city received the $75,000 in urgent repair funds from the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. And as you recall, we did a joint application with the city on these funds. So Ms. Kennedy will be moving forward in determining the folks who will be getting this money and the cooperation between the city and the county to get this.
What's the deadline for those expenditures on
I think on the urgent repair funds, I don't know how long do we have to spend those? I think they normally go pretty quickly, but I think you have up to 12 months.
That grant's like an 18-month grant, and we probably won't get it till April.
And it's for those projects that are 5,000 or less. You know, the other project we're working on right now, the scattered housing project, is, you know, they've become quite large in scope, and you know, we're spending $30,000 to $60,000 on those projects right now. But this is the little stuff that really helps people replace doors and windows and some roofing stuff to make their houses a little bit more energy efficient. So this is a good project, and thank her for her work in cooperation and on that. And then the CDBG project update. In the packet, we were asked to give you the list of the contractors who were licensed with the department. That is on page 42. Starting on page 43, you can see the bid tabulation that we received. the last bid opening on February 5th. And I think they've awarded 2 more contracts. So we're moving along and moving along quickly, but we still have some time constraint issues with that March 20th deadline coming quickly.
I've got a
Karen, do you want to?
got a question. I see in here, like on this first bid, you had a contractor from Lee County and then was the lowest bid. But you have one that's pretty close to it from, say, Nashville. If they were flip-flopped, what criteria do you use? Is it just low bid?
For grant projects, it is just low bid.
Is it required by law? I mean,
Yes.
it is. Okay.
The only other way would be if the Nashville contractor was a low bidder and he had 3 other houses, and it was a time issue. We could come to you and to the state and ask for permission to move on because of the time issue. But most of the time with this kind of bid package, it's low bid.
Gotcha. Okay.
Let me ask, doesn't the statute, do you follow the statute on that one, the lowest responsible bidder?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So there are circumstances in which it could be low bidder, but not the most responsible person.
Yes, sir. We would check the
Okay.
references on
That's
somebody
what-
new.
So that's the
Yes, sir.
difference in that.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
We also took bids
Sorry.
last week, and those are something that Ms. Chrisman would like us to talk to you about with
I
the
got that email
extension.
today.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Before we jump into the security discussion issue, I wanted to let everybody know that the airport authority is having a meeting this Thursday, the 21st. And it's, I believe it's at 10 o'clock in the morning, and wanted the commissioners to be invited. I have more information on that if anybody's interested in attending. The 4th item is obviously something that's come up recently with what happened in Missouri. And some of the commissioners prior to that had been discussing security at these meetings with me, and decided at the request of Commissioner Lamont to put this under my comments and just open up the floor to the commissioners to ask them if there's anything you'd like staff to do to, to set security issues in place for the commissioners' meetings. That's strictly up to y'all, what you want to do.
Are we having an armed sheriff's deputy here every meeting from here on out?
Well, it's kind of been working that way. We have one today. He was asked to be here to represent the department, so we kind of try to always have a representative here who can help us. But if you want a uniformed deputy, or there's even been discussions, whether we need to have metal detectors or go to that length like they do at the courthouse for court. I just need a little bit of guidance and. Well, add some more doors to get out of here quickly. I don't, it just depends on if you want to, what you'd like for me to do to do it. It is a serious issue, and I think some of the commissioners have felt uncomfortable in some recent meetings. I'm open to suggestions, or we'll be happy to look into things.
Why don't I ask you and our HR director to get together with a representative from the sheriff department and then bring back a recommendation.
Okay.
Will that work?
Yes, sir. We'll work with you on that.
I think the more visibility is better.
I don't think we're really prepared today to make a recommendation.
Well, I understand. I just, whether you wanted me to work on it and come up with a plan, or, and so I got my direction.
I would hope that, out in our general population, there are not people who would like to come in here like they did down in Missouri.
Well, don't tell me.
Yeah, I know that.
Do you want the CIP? They already have them all. And the last thing, Mr. Chairman, is I did, today on our CIP calendar, the CIP was due to the board and the finance committee today. It's just there for y'all to begin review. Like I told the finance committee earlier, when you read through it, you realize that the plan is pretty much dependent on the quarter-cent sales tax. And without the quarter-cent sales tax, as Mr. Reeves said, I said I'd probably have to redo the plan. He said I could just shred the plan. That's probably true.
Burn it.
Burn it.
That's right.
And, but the governor has a burning ban, so we'll be shredding.
Not anymore.
That's right.
I lifted it.
But, the total projects requested were 123 million. And, I've whittled that down to 94 million. So you can see that there's a lot of need in the county. The schools are projecting population growth, and based on the upcoming census dress rehearsal and the numbers that Mr. Kovasik's been coming up with, and projecting that by 2014, 2015, they'll need 2 more elementary schools. So, and they're talking about renovations to the 2 middle schools in addition to the high school. So they represent 2/3 of that 94 million that I recommended. So,
Well, this
Yes.
CIP only goes through 2013.
yes, sir.
Of course, it'll be updated next year to include 14.
Yes, sir. But in the plan, I've tried to tie revenue towards the projects. If I couldn't get revenue tied to the projects, I pushed it out beyond the 5 years if I thought it was a worthwhile project. And of course, that revenue that I've tied to quite a few of those projects is the quarter-cent sales tax. So, we'll be able to discuss that over the next couple of months, but I don't really think we can take action on the plan until after the election. And that's my report, sir.
Some of you have had questions about the CIP and how much value it has. It has no more value than you have money. Until you do it. That's all it's worth. You can't pay for it. All you can do is look at it and spread it. But the bottom line is, when you start taking on debt in the area of $20 and $30 million a pop, that's very strong for a small county. Very strong. We're sitting on 54 million. We're looking at, what's the latest estimate on the ever recurring
Senior.
high?
Their request right now is 25 million.
Okay. That's 25. If you're looking at 25 over the next year or 2, and following that would be another elementary school. 3 years behind that, another elementary school. You're looking at close to, what is that? 65, $75 million just in schools. Just in schools. At some point in time, we have to make some tough decisions about putting ourselves in check and trying to do more with what we have and not keep building to try and keep up with predictions. We've got Don Kovacic coming to one of our meetings pretty soon to talk about the growth and the growth patterns. So maybe we'll get some insight from that.
One last point, Mr. Chairman, I forgot to bring up, and I think Ms. Minter meant to bring up too, is the analysis that we had today was purely on debt. It did not take into account any operational expenditures that would be associated with the project or projects. And the CIP, we try to estimate those operational costs in each project. So as you read through, you'll see it. And some of the folks were trying to say that the new buildings, compared to what they're in right now, would give us some operational savings. But it's not my experience that those savings ever really materialize. So just remember, when you build a new building, whether it's a renovation or anything like that, you will have ongoing expenditures that will probably increase over time, and that has a bigger effect on your tax rate than actually issuing the debt.
Well, and a lot of times we fail to recognize the fact that some of that will be recurring expense, you know, that you don't have to live with from now on after you do it. And I also, as a board of commissioners, we have a fiscal responsibility to the citizens of this county not to let our county get in a bad financial condition. And that's one thing I like about Davenport's presentation. They always do it on the side that's not going to allow you to get in a bad shape financially.
Their estimates are conservative, so you feel pretty confident that what they say will happen will be the minimum. So they do a great job.
Well, in addition to that, over the years, this board has put in some balances that help us stay focused and stay within the confines of what we actually have available to us.
50% and 15%. Okay, anything else, Mr. Crumpton?
No, sir.
Okay. Now commissioner's comments, Mr. Pascal.
Me?
Next.
That's you.
In your package, you had some additional items of interest dated February 18th, and item number 5, in December, before Christmas, I had emailed John with some, what I thought was important information from the schools regarding some issues. And if you take a look at my letter, the questions that I asked were, number 1, the current number of ESL students broken down by class and school, K through 12. Number 2, comparative data of ESL student enrollment over the past 7 years. Number 3, dropout statistics for our Hispanic students for the past 5 years. And basically the others were just questions of policy. But it took quite a while to get this back, and where I'm going with this is, you know, I hear that our county is growing, you know, we've got to be prepared for that growth. I'm glad that we've got Don Cavazos coming in here, because I'm wondering, you know, if it's the good kind of growth. And I think that, I'm serious. I'm looking at this information, and the thing that turned me on this was the fact that, you know, we've got 1,465 English as second language students at Lee Senior, or our whole Lee County schools, and at over $8,000 a student. That's a tax burden of $11.9 million coming out of local, state, and federal tax credits. And so the reason I was requesting this, I think it's important for us to see future trends, you know. And we had a breakfast meeting with a couple of the school people last week, and John helped me out with this. Of our new students that they're projecting next year, 28% of those will be probably the ESLs. And I'm really concerned about this and the burden on the taxpayers on this. You know, we're just assuming that when the schools come to us and say we need more classroom space and whatever, that it's all legitimate. But I think it's time that we take a good hard look at this data and start asking our state government and our federal government, you know, we're paying too much of a burden here for lack of effective enforcement on your part. So where I started to go with this, the last paragraph of this, I won't say who signed this letter, but it says, due to time restraints of staff in the future, any request for the magnitude of this response will be solely at the discretion of the Board of Education by action of the Board of Commissioners, not that of an individual commissioner. I was totally appalled at that, because first of all, besides a commissioner, I'm a taxpayer. And under the Freedom of Information Act, I have every right to request this information as an individual taxpayer.
You're also a member of finance.
And I also thought it's strange to be poking your banker in the eye with a stick when I read that. So, anyway, I would say maybe not off to such a good start. I'm not going to hold grudges. I want to work together, but I think that, we need to work together to get resolution from the state and federal government. I don't think we need to keep raising taxes from all areas just to pay for things that really we shouldn't be paying for.
I think in the past, we have preferred that commissioners go through the county manager to request information. Yes.
The statute says they respond to requests from the board.
What does the statute say about Freedom of Information Act as a taxpayer?
This is just the state statute.
Does that, Mr. Hall, does that mean as a whole or
If this
individual?
board makes a request, they're supposed to respond.
To respond to it, okay.
So I thought I was doing the right thing by directing it through our county manager, which would be, in my opinion, the appropriate.
Based on my assumption, you did follow the right route.
I would tend to agree with you. That's not the best way to get off to a good start. You represent this board on their board. You merely ask for some information. If that's the game they want to play, then so be it. We can take the same hardline position.
Well, what really, I guess, threw me off a little bit was I had done my own homework. So I discovered that every one of our elementary schools, we have at least one ESL teacher, possibly two, and there's a ESL aide at each of those elementary schools. And so to me, if they have those teachers at each of those schools, it seems like it's just a simple phone call to the principal of those schools, how many do you have? But one of the responses there was they don't track all that data because the state only requires that they record the population for the entire school of the Hispanic population. I'm thinking maybe that's why things are so out of whack, because people aren't tracking trends and looking to see where is all this expansion coming from. So if you look at from 2005, 2006, 2006, 2007, that jumped 152 students, and if they're saying it's going to be even more next year, I think that's cause for concern, on how our budget's going to handle, the school's request.
Okay, Mr. Quigley.
Only thing is, I'd like to talk about just what the bottom line means for the taxpayers when it comes to the sales tax vote in May. We need to let everybody understand that, we have a debt capacity of $8 million. And if we don't either raise taxes or have the 4% sales tax, then nothing will be done at Lee Senior. So, people need to understand that. That's what's the bottom line right now. There's nothing else we can do at this point other than those two options. So, if this community is serious about renovations at Lee Senior, you better be grabbing your neighbors and everybody going to the polls and voting for the sales tax. If you don't, if it fails, we're just going to have to sit tight. So, I just wanted I want to be very frank about what is at stake.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to dovetail on to what Commissioner Kelly just said, and reading the County Lines News last night, looking back over it, with regards to the 1/4 sales tax, Alexander County on January the 8th passed by a resounding margin, 1,790 to 352. And counties that have already passed the 1/4 sales tax is Catawba, Martin, Pitt, Sampson, and Surrey counties in referendums in November '07. This coming May, in which we have just, by this board's decision today, have joined putting the quarter-cent sales tax on the ballot. And those counties are Caswell, Duplin, Edgecombe, Lincoln, Nash, Onslow, and Wilson County. But I think it's important to know, let people know that this is important to the education here in the county for the children. It helps us spread this around. We hate putting any tax on property owners. And this, I think, is the only fair tax. At least that's what I'm hearing from everybody that calls me or I talk to out on the street. This is the best way to do it, go about implementing something like this to help the schools and the colleges out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I've got two items. One deals with a request for water line that Mr. Hall and the county manager are going to get with the city on. They're not familiar with it, they want to give one or both a call and talk about it. That could be potentially a long-term problem for us. We may want to get on that. The other one was, we probably should have at least mentioned that resolution and the consent agenda, the one for the 4-year cycle of tax reval.
Well, that's what I was thinking about when I asked him.
Sorry.
I threw mine away, so you might want to read it.
Do you want, I'd be happy to read that one.
All right. The other one is just access to the road to the industrial park. Had anybody been engaged in that? Have you seen it?
The one about the trash and the litter and the deer carcasses?
It's in that packet you got there.
I've been involved in that one.
Do we have a
We did, and there's not one up there now. We talked about putting up having the EDC put up some type of fence that could be secured. But the four-wheelers and some of the other folks were just driving around that chain link fence, so they're not sure how effective that other fence. And plus, you're getting on to those private property. We only have the easement through there, and once we get off that easement, we get on the private property. So we have to be careful what we erect around that area. But I am working with Mr. Hughes and the EDC board on that.
Well, this email suggested you hadn't heard anything from the commissioners, and this is my first time seeing it, so I'm not being non-responsive, but I didn't know about it.
I did respond to him.
Okay. That's good.
It was the first time I've seen that from him, but it was not the first time Mr. Hughes had spoken to me about the problem. So we are aware of it.
Help you read.
That's it.
Okay. Owen, do you have anything?
You want me to read this resolution? This one's a lot shorter than the ones that we did before. A resolution by the Lee County Board of Commissioners, whereas the Lee County Board of Commissioners desires to have the next reappraisal of real property conducted by staff of the County Tax Administrator's Office as part of its program work each year, and whereas the board feels it will be in the best interest of the county and the property owners therein to reappraise property on a more frequent basis than octennial as required by statute, and whereas North Carolina General Statute 105-286, Section A2 authorizes a county to advance a scheduled octennial reappraisal, and whereas the Lee County Board of Commissioners desires to advance the next reappraisal of real property and establish a 4-year cycle of reappraisal thereafter, now therefore be it resolved by the Lee County Board of Commissioners that Lee County's next reappraisal of property shall be effective on January 1st, 2011, and each 4-year thereafter. In this plan for reappraisal shall continue in effect unless or until amended by repeal. Adopted this 18th day of February 2008, Lee County Board of Commissioners.
All right, we adopted that in our consent agenda.
That's correct, and I think it had been the intent of the board all along. We just did not have the formal resolution. Last, when we converted to the 4-year, we just did a 4-year and didn't do it, so it would go every 4 years. So it just took care of that.
All right,
And that was requested by the North Carolina Department of Revenue, correct?
They called us and reminded us they needed to have that resolution.
Thank you.
we have a public hearing scheduled for 7 o'clock this evening at the courthouse. Therefore, I am going to recess this meeting until 7 o'clock tonight at the old courthouse. You're dismissed.